Hello and welcome to Inside UK Column's occasional interview programme. Today I'll be speaking to William Binney, former intelligence official with the US National Security Agency. Bill retired from the NSA in 2001 after a 30-year career. Welcome to the programme, Bill.
Yeah, it's good to be with you again.
Okay, well, I'd like to begin perhaps with your thoughts on the news of Donald Trump's apparent impeachment. That was perhaps expected, but I'm just interested in what you think about that.
Well, I don't really understand the basis of it. There's no citation cited for a crime or misdemeanor. There's no violation of the Constitution cited. They're just general statements that we don't like him and he's doing something we don't like, and so we want to get rid of him. That's all. So it seems to be a baseless impeachment. You see, in a court of law, which is what's going to be the trial in the Senate, the hearsay is not admissible. So everything they have is hearsay. You know, it's a bunch of people who don't like him who are saying bad things about him. Well, that's to be expected, I think. So that's pretty much what I think of it. I think it's really showing the depth of descent of the Democratic Party to the pits of ugliness.
Well, that's a good point. Can the Democratic Party survive this at the end of the day?
I think they're going to have a hard time. I think it's going to be with them for quite some time what they've done.
Okay.
And I know that the American people aren't really. They're not. You know, they depict us as deplorables and stupid, but we see right through this stuff. I mean, you can see if you have if you've ever seen some of the interviews after the impeachment vote and all that have been taking place here around in Michigan and various other states in the United States, people are not happy with this. They think the Democrats have lost it. They've basically deep sixed their party, and that Trump is going to win by a landslide. That's the expectation now from the voters.
Right. So there's no possibility that what's going on at the moment could prevent him from running for a second term?
Oh no, absolutely not. The only way it could be is if the Senate impeached him, and they're not going to do that because there's no evidence behind it. I mean, if they had some evidence that was clearly tangible that they could point to and say, here's the violation and there's the statute in our law or the specific quote in the Constitution, they don't do that. They don't have any of that. So, it's just shallow, empty rhetoric from them.
Okay, well, look, President Trump has been under attack since before he was elected in 2016, and this, of course, led to the whole Russiagate mess. And as part of that, the FBI ran an investigation into alleged collusion between the Russians, and they called their investigation, I believe, Crossfire Hurricane. Now, on the 11th of December, then, a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz gave evidence to a Senate committee about a report that he produced entitled Review of 4 FISA applications and other aspects of the investigation. So first of all, for people in Britain who don't know these things, what is a FISA application?
Well, that's a request to the secret court to get a warrant, okay? So in other words, it's like getting a warrant to justify raiding somebody or going in and taking their computers and things of that nature. So it's like a court order to collect data or information or material from people.
So in this case, what were they particularly interested in?
Spying on the president's campaign, and it was pretty clear. There were 17 irregularities or violations of procedure or law involved in that process. And if you say, well, okay, being a mathematician, I always calculate the random probability of something like that happening. Well, in the case of all 17 of those items they went against the President Trump and his administration. So if you just figured, well, there's any given issue, it could either go for him or against him. So it's 1 chance in 2 of being that, right? So it's like all 17 being against President Trump is like 1 chance in 2 to the 17th power, which is randomly like 1 chance in 130,000. So it's kind of small. The likelihood that it wasn't intentional is pretty small. Okay, so So what that really means is the Durham, who's coming back through with a criminal investigation, is going after this material as well, and he will be putting out indictments, I'm sure, to the grand jury for issuing against individuals who are involved. And it's obvious that he should do that, and the entire public here in the United States expects that. If they don't get it, then we're going to be calling the Department of Justice the Department of Just Us, and we, the people, are not involved and not included. So in other words, we're going to have two different sets of statutes for people to obey, those for the elite and those for the rest of us.
Okay, so obviously a large part of what subsequently happened with the whole Russiagate affair was the dossier that Christopher Steele produced, of course, former MI6 operative. And the Horowitz report says that the FBI knew that the Steele dossier was nonsense as soon as 2017, January 2017. That's correct?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. But it's even worse than that, though, because from the work that the people who are, some in the UK and some here affiliated with us or working with us in the VIPs, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, just looking at the forensics of the data of Guccifer 2 and also the DNC emails posted by WikiLeaks, can clearly show that this was not a hack. It was an inside job. It was something that was done internally, downloaded to a storage device, like, for example, the 3 batches of WikiLeaks published data from the DNC, 23 and 25 May, and also the 26th of August. Those batches clearly show properties of a FAT file transfer to a storage device, which means, it was physically transferred to a storage device and then physically transported before WikiLeaks could publish it. So that's not a hack. And then, of course, with the DNC, with the Guccifer 2 data, which was the predicate for the Mueller report, as well as the Rosenstein indictment of the GRU agents, that whole thing basically fell through, because we could show. I did some of this work with Duncan Campbell over there in the UK, looking at this material, and it came across at speeds that were not that couldn't go across the international net from the U.S. to Russia, for example. It couldn't be a hack of that nature because the speeds were just too high. And we attempted it to do that. Even afterward, people thought we could do it. It could happen, and so we tested it. We tested it from Albania, Serbia, Netherlands, and also in the UK. We had a data center in the UK, and between data center in the UK and a data center in New Jersey. And the best we could do was with that link, and that was only slightly less than 1/4 the capacity. So we knew it wasn't a hack; it was a local download. But then we looked at the data for Guccifer 2 that he put out there for the 5th of July and the 1st of September. And if you look just at seconds, milliseconds, and minutes, you could merge the 2 databases without conflict at the millisecond level. So in other words, the holes in the 5 July material were filled in by material from the 1st of September, which meant that Guccifer 2 was playing with the data. And then later on, and we suspected that was probably, at the time, we here were suspecting CIA as the culprit for creating Guccifer 2. Since then, of course, we found that we have a source from internally in the CIA who said, yes, both DC Leaks and Guccifer 2 were a creation of the CIA. And that fits with the material that the that Guccifer 2 published on the 15th of June, where it had the fingerprints for Russians, the Cyrillic and so on in the data, so that implied the Russians did a hack. Well, when you looked at it, some of the fellows who were over there working with us found 5 items that were in the Guccifer 2 15 June material that also showed up in the Podesta emails of 21 September posted by WikiLeaks, except the data at WikiLeaks didn't have those signatures. So it implied that Guccifer 2 inserted those signatures, and it further implied that since it was the Russians that they tried to make it out to be, or make it look like, it implied that probably was the Marble framework in use, which was a data program that CIA had in Vault 7 that was compromised, that said it will make it look like there were 5 other countries involved in a hack. So in other words, the ones they could simulate were Russian, Chinese, North Korean, Iranian, and Arabic. So that said that, it implied that that was used to insert, Christopher II to insert the Russian fingerprints to make it look like the Russians did the hack, but in fact they didn't. So, and in the end, that's why NSA had only moderate confidence in the ICA, because the Internet Intelligence Community Assessment, which is really just three agencies, NSA, CIA, and FBI. And the reason they said they had moderate was because they didn't capture any of this data being transferred anywhere in the world. So it meant that it wasn't a hack there, and that's why they only had moderate confidence in that. So it all fit together as to total fabrication, most likely done by CIA, according to our informants internally. It was done by CIA.
So, that's pretty significant evidence that this wasn't a hack. It was done internally, as you say. You then put that evidence in, for example, to Roger Stone's case recently. How was that received?
Also, I did it with General Flynn, and the judges in those cases would not allow the testimony in the court. Well, it's grounds for appeal for Roger Stone, so it's outright grounds. I mean, it's the whole idea of going after him was predicated on the Russiagate story. And that was a fabrication by the FBI and the CIA, and the DOJ was involved in that. Also, I'm quite sure that President Obama was involved in that too. So all of that what is grounds for an appeal. I mean, the reason that, for example, General Flynn took a plea deal and pled guilty was because they threatened his son. They were going to go after his son if he didn't take a plea deal. Well, that's coercion. They coerced him into doing that, as well as setting him up in the first place. So, all of that is pretty criminal activity on the part of our government and departments in that government. And some of these judges are involved in it too. So they're a part of this deep state too. So they're starting to stand up too, and that's going to be, just showing you who's who here in our deep state and secret government.
Now, I'd like to come back, if I could, to the Horowitz report and
Sure.
And Christopher Steele, because of course the FBI then used Christopher Steele's
Yep.
information, despite the fact they knew that it was really inappropriate. They used that information to target Carter Page in particular with one of the FISA warrants.
Yeah, but see, what that gave him was, if you recall, back in January 2014, President Obama limited the NSA look, or the IC look, into a warrant to 2 hops so for example, if they had Carter Page, then that he would have, if he had a link to the Republican National Committee, that would be link 1 from the Republican National Committee out to anybody in that they were communicating with. That's link 2. That's where their limit was. So now that gave them the ability to spy on everybody in the Republican Party, the entire Trump administration, the Trump campaign, everybody. And that's what that one warrant did.
The allegation was that Carter Page was working with or for the Russians. That was clearly nonsense.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it was all a fabrication. It was done. We have another whistleblower who has come out talking about a program set up by Brennan and Clapper out of CIA. This one was called the Hammer. Your listeners can Google that with the Hammer and CIA, and you can read about it. But it was set up, according to this whistleblower, separate and apart from the existing government spying network. But they used some of the stuff that we left them that they were using on the internet, the current spying on the world. So they had that software, and they were using that separately. This is CIA doing this. Brennan's group inside the CIA spying on the Trump campaign and certain other targeted people like judges, federal judges, and things of that nature. So this fellow's out there telling us about that. He's also giving us some data that we can verify that he's got illegally. So of course it needs to be investigated by Barr and Durham. That needs to be followed up because this is clearly. I mean, they did it because, as a separate program under CIA, no one else in the government knew about this program running. So they could spy on anybody they wanted, and there would be no trace records for anybody to hold them accountable. Okay, it was something, if they used the NSA data, it would be recorded. People coming into the network looking for data or soliciting data, doing a query on their network, that would be recorded in their system, and that could be backtracked and shown and demonstrated, so you could hold people accountable for what they did. But if they're doing it separate, as a separate program, isolated from the rest of the government, then nobody knows that, and there are no records of anybody being able to trace what they're doing. And that's fundamentally what Clapper and Brennan were doing under this program. And that says that primarily the designer of this entire approach, the falsification of the records, all of that for the Steele, all of the organization, the FISA approaches, all of that was a coordinated effort between DOJ, FBI, and CIA, and that Brennan was the architect of that program. That's what we're coming down with as evidence right now.
Now, the FBI, the Justice Department, and Christopher Steele all leaked Carter Page's name to the media. And so my question now is, how do you see the media role in this?
They're facilitators. I mean, I always go back to what Casey, Director Casey of the CIA said back, I think it was 1982 or 83. At that time, he said, and Ray McGovern, who's our founder of the VIPs, has a friend who was witnessed this statement. He said, Casey said in a small group after a meeting he had that they'd been attempting to infiltrate the media for decades, and that we will know when we have succeeded, when everything that the people believe is false. So I see the media as an extended arm of CIA.
That's quite a statement. Now, just asking you specifically about Christopher Steele, if I may. The Horowitz report has a lot to say about him, and he's mentioned over 1,000 times, in fact. Is it your view that Steele's role in this is as anything more than a paid consultant? And the reason I'm asking that is because it's pretty clear from statements from former senior Foreign Office people that the view in the UK is that the UK should be looking to the European Union for security and defence partnerships. And just to quote one person in particular, unless Trump can be impeached or house-trained. Those are the words he used. Well, Trump's been impeached, but I'm interested in your thoughts on Steele's role here and whether this was actually an attempt by the UK to house-train Trump.
I think it's probably an extent. I think the Durham and Barr investigation is going to show a lot more tentacles and spreading out inside the UK and their relationship with this effort. So I think that's going to be coming out soon too. We have to wait for the Durham program, the Durham investigation to become public.
There are claims of Russian interference in UK politics as well, particularly around the Brexit referendum. And the Parliament Intelligence Committee produced a report on this called Russia, which Boris Johnson refused. Well, they gave it to Boris Johnson on the 11th of November, but he refused to release the report in the run-up to the general election here in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and that started quite a furore. Now, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism then attempted to force the issue in the courts. They weren't able to force the issue in the courts because they couldn't actually find a witness to testify that British security services had approved the report for public dissemination. And then during the general election campaign itself, a document about the UK's National Health Service, which Jeremy Corbyn had a copy of, but his copy had redactions in it. That same document appeared on the Reddit social network in an unredacted form. And Reddit then immediately claimed that this had happened as a result of a Russian hack and a Russian leak. And when we look at who the key players are on both sides of the Atlantic, we find what seems to be collusion between intelligence agencies, NGOs like the Atlantic Council, social media companies, and the mainstream media. And so the question is, you've suggested earlier in the program that there's collusion between the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA in what's been going on with Trump. But do you think on it's overstating the situation to say that there's collusion between a much broader range of organizations as well?
No, I think we have that collusion already laid out with the Five Eyes program, all the Five Eyes countries participating together. And then there's like 8 or 9 other countries that are participating with them in this worldwide collection of data basically on all the citizens of their countries, of the world. And so that simply means that they're trying to get control over everybody. And so in order to do that, they have their druthers in terms of what they want to happen, and that's where they push the mainstream media to do the bidding. That is to make sure the narrative fits with what they want said, and that seems to be not limited to the United States. There seems to be a cooperative effort around the world to do that.
So is it your view that perhaps the involvement of Christopher Steele and the network around him could be viewed as British interference in a United States election process?
Absolutely, and also it goes back to Cambridge Analytica. Some of the work they did interfered in the election here too. So, it's a matter of who was really doing it. I mean, so far, the U.S. government has not produced any information that shows any Russian interference. In the Rosenstein indictment, also the Mueller report, they referred to trolls for the Russian government, as the IRA was one of them, and the affiliated companies that are associated with them. The Internet
Bill,
Research.
Just for a British audience, who is the IRA?
That's the Internet Research Agency that's based in St. Petersburg in Russia. Well, they denied it. They said they're not part of the U.S. government, and they sent lawyers into the U.S. courts to challenge that in court. And the U.S. government couldn't prove any of what they said about them. And the judge really ripped them up and down. They said, you can't go around accusing people without having evidence. And they didn't. So he basically said you are no longer allowed to talk about them being Russian trolls because you can't prove any of it. And so that basically threw a lot of the Mueller report and the Rosenstein indictment out. And then they had all of these transactions in the Mueller and the Rosenstein indictment talking about the GRU agents coming in and going back and forth and so on. That is not NSA data. That's not data coming from NSA because that would be classified and it must be redacted. Otherwise, Mueller would be, violating the laws for protection of classified material. So anything NSA does is classified. So you can't just openly say that kind of stuff in a public publication. So it's not NSA, and I think very strongly it came from CrowdStrike as the most likely candidate, and that appears to be made up too. So they concoct this entire scenario and haven't been able to prove any part of it at all.
How do we solve this problem?
The way to do it is put people in jail who participated and concocted this and did it. Because they're guilty of any number of crimes, felonies, violations of human rights in the Constitution, and violations of law, statutes in the U.S. Statutes. All of them, they're all guilty of that. They perjured themselves in court. They lied to the court. They, all kinds of manipulation of the court and fabrication of data. So they all need to be up on charges in court and go to jail. That will start to solve the problem.
Okay, but that might solve the problem domestically. But if what we're talking about here is interference in an election from the United Kingdom, it's a bit harder to prosecute people on this side of the Atlantic from your side.
Yeah, but we have a cooperation through the Mutual Law Enforcement Act treaty that we could indict people in different countries and issue warrants. I mean, I think the Italians have issued a warrant on former President Bush and Vice President Cheney, for I think the rendering program, the torture program, rendering people to torture in different countries, including black sites in Eastern Europe.
What do you think it would take to actually get that into progress?
I think we'll know. My expectation is that by late spring or early summer of this coming year, Durham will be issuing indictments. And if he starts doing that, then you'll know we're on the right track to resolving this issue. Because then we'll have people in court and they will go to jail for the crimes they've committed.
Well, look, we're just about out of time. Bill, thank you much for joining me today. But I can't just let you go, though, without asking your view on what the UK is doing to Julian Assange at the moment.
I think that's criminal. I mean, they're not taking care of him properly. If he's in their custody, he should be taken care of properly, and not be in the state of health that he is right now. That at least I've been led to believe.
Do you think there's any prospect? I mean, obviously he's there because there's an extradition proceeding in progress from the United States side. Do you think there's any prospect of that being dropped?
Well, I think after the Durham investigation, it's going to be pretty clear the extent of the cooperation and the violation of laws and human rights around the world by other countries who are participating with the U.S. in that process. So that may, in fact, I mean, it should change the complexion of the case against him. It should. I mean, after all, he published information that was, the truth, and it's not. He didn't publish anything that wasn't true, the only reason they're going after him is because they didn't like what he published, and those similar kinds of things have been published by the New York Times, the Guardian, the Washington Post. All of them have done similar kinds of things. So if they're going to go after him, all those other publications and all those reporters and so on are also in jeopardy. That's the one thing they fail to comprehend, is they're all in jeopardy, and the government can come after them for the same reason, to do the same kind of thing to them based on what they're doing to Julian.
On that note, Bill, thank you very much for joining me today, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the very near future.
Okay, thank you.